On today's episode of Mythos Busters, the Dunwich Legacy Deluxe Expansion Box is discussed, encounter cards, player cards, and everything in between. In addition, a new fan-made scenario, Rotham Backcountry, is highlighted, and the rules FAQ for Arkham Horror the card game, official from Fantasy Flight Games, is discussed as well. All this and more on episode 12 of Mythos Busters.
Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Mythos Busters, where pulling the tentacle isn't always a good thing. I'm Sean, and with me tonight is Ian.
Hello.
And Nick.
Hi, guys.
And Scat.
Hello.
And sadly, it is another dark and Tomless night, but hopefully we'll get him on the next one. Tonight, we've got a very special show. We're going to talk a little bit about... We're going to address the Marie Lambeau contest that we're running at the very top, because we're changing some things about that. We've got our standard news and articles. We're going to talk about a fan-made scenario that Nick is, I guess, rather excited about. And then we're going to talk about the Dunwich Legacy. So... fast on the heels of our of our breaking the spoiler, I don't know, whatever that moratorium period was that we arbitrarily chose.
The spoiler barrier.
Yeah, we'll go with that. So we're done with waiting so long. So instead of waiting 3 or 4 months to talk about the core, we're basically going to talk about Dunwich tonight. So we will definitely spoiler alert before we get there. Guys, I think we're in for a good show. I'm pretty excited about this one.
I can't wait to talk about Dunwich, because that was... oh man, it was so exciting to play it, but let's do our other stuff first.
Let's get there. All right, so...
let's get that all out of the way, all that garbage.
So the way time works is weird, because right now we sit with the last episode. We're recording episode 12. The last episode we released was episode 9. So I'm telling you in the future, in which you would have already heard the episodes that I'm talking about not having heard now. But... basically, since we announced the Marie Lambeau contest in an episode that took quite a long while to get out, we're going to modify the entry date on that. Before I said you want to have your entries into our Gmail account, mythosbusterspod@gmail.com, by March 1st, and we're going to go ahead and change that to April 1st, so that way we're not crunching anyone, and anyone who would like to participate has ample time to get their entry in. Ian, any other details that you'd like to remind everyone of, just so we can get that out there again?
Just the basics, which is creating a card with a cult trait, which there are currently none in the card pool, and sending it preferably as an image file to our email, which is mythosbusterspod@gmail.com. And that's about it, I think.
Perfect. All right, looking forward to see those. We've got a few entries. They are pretty damn good, so even if you have Marie, I would encourage people to enter just for the sake of entering. This is a lot of, I don't know. It's fun to make custom cards, and it's challenging to make only the one. I guarantee you, if you hop onto Strange Eons or whatever program you choose to use and start churning out your first card, you'll get an idea for a second, and the third one, and then all of a sudden 5 hours will have passed. And yeah, that's how that generally works. So enter, please. Moving on to the news, Nick, why don't you start us out with kind of community stuff? Sure.
So first I want to talk about, like I did last episode, I want to highlight a fan-made scenario. This one is made by a gentleman who goes by the name of Tim Cox, and on Discord you probably know him as Rushlight or Rush L. That's his Discord handle. This is the first scenario in a custom 3-part campaign that he's working on. And he just released this first scenario to BGG, and I had the privilege of playtesting it a few weeks ago, and it's pretty fun. The campaign is called the North Country Cycle, and scenario 1 is Rotham Backcountry. So it puts us into a new environment, and the synopsis.
Are we caught here in a fiery blaze?
You know what? Yes, fire is a pretty big theme in this one.
Yes.
So the synopsis that he has written up on BGG for the campaign as a whole is: all is not well in upstate New York. Nestled deep in the forest blanketing the slopes of the Adirondacks, the small township of Rotham provides a tiny, bright dot of civilization in the dark wilderness. Primarily focused on lumber, the citizens of Rotham have lived a peaceful existence, but now they face a horror beyond their abilities. Can you help? And I will tell you that my first playthrough, I just did Roland using the same Roland deck that I used for our Mythos Busters 4-player campaign through Night of the Zealot, and I was not able to help. I did not make it very far, and that's kind of a theme I'm learning with Roland, is that I really have to build a deck with the scenario in mind for him, and I can't just use a generic Roland deck for most things, because, as you'll learn later on in this show, I have had trouble with Roland going blind into scenarios. But my second attempt as Roland with a deck that was more custom-tailored to fit this scenario went a little bit better. I still didn't complete it 100%. I didn't get the quote-unquote good ending, but I did get a lot further. So it's a good one. Check it out, and look forward to Part 2 and 3 of the North Country cycle as well.
So, spoiler-free, like theme story-wise, are there any kind of like influences or parallels that you would draw to maybe describe it?
That's interesting. Nothing struck out to me immediately. Basically what it is the first scenario, the town of Rotham is shut down, and you basically have to find a way into the town that isn't along the main road, since the cops are patrolling that. And the whole time, there are police officers that are moving through the wilderness that are aloof, but are really hindering your progress, very similar to one of the scenarios we'll talk about later in this episode, which he said he had that idea, and then he saw that Fantasy Flight released that, and he was a little upset that they both kind of came to the same conclusion, but hey, great minds, they think alike.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of the basis of it. I guess it kind of gave me a little bit of a Stranger Things vibe, but I don't think he was going for that. I think that was just because forest, and you're dealing with regular police officers, but yeah,
cool.
That's about it. Mm-hmm.
Sounds fun. And where did you find it? Where could people get a hold of it if they're interested?
He sent it to me directly, but it is on BoardGameGeek.com. If you go to the Arkham Horror the card game page and to the files, you can find it on there. For our Discord chat and also in our show notes, you will see the link to download that. So you can just check our show notes. The description below of this episode when it airs, and you can find the link for that.
Sweet. Sounds fun. I haven't dipped a toe in the custom scenario world yet, but I know it's burgeoning. I'm actually, we should really get around to that.
It's a surprisingly deep well right now, yes.
Yes. Like, I hear like every other person talking in our Discord is working on a custom scenario, it turns out, so...
Yeah, I think it's more prolific than Lord of the Rings at the same time in its life. Well, there were quite a few when Lord of the Rings first got started, but I feel like more is happening right now for Arkham.
Notable among them, one Matt Phoenix Newman.
Yeah. Yep.
So a little trivia for you there. I can't remember if he got into how he got the job when we interviewed him. I think so.
Yeah, I think he mentioned the custom scenario stuff and whatnot.
Anyway, so best case scenario, guys, work on a custom scenario, work for FFG in the future, get that portfolio fleshed out. All right, so moving on from there, one thing we actually were made aware of by, again, Matt Newman, was a resource that FFG kind of threw together ad hoc, it seems, and very cool. But basically, it is campaign rules for the Dunwich Legacy and for the subsequent Miskatonic Museum. So this is kind of a live PDF that they're maintaining, or at least it sounded like the intent was to maintain an update that compiles the deluxe campaign guide with the subsequent Mythos packs. So right now, it's out there. It's got extracurricular activity, House Always Wins, Miskatonic Museum. It'll be updated again when Essex County Express comes out. That's kind of cool. If you want everything in one place, if you don't do the cool thing that I do, where you just toss all of your your inserts into the old artist supply case and just let it be. If you want something a little bit more organized, it's a cool little resource. You can find that out on the the FFG product page under, I think, support or what is that one? What is that heading titled?
Player resources.
Player resources. There you go. So check that out. Maybe link it. I don't know. Maybe if they updated the link will break. I don't know how that works. But go get it.
Yeah, I think the link might change, but as long as you look under the product page, you'll always be able to find it.
Awesome. Okay, so then more for official news. Ian, you want to walk us through what we've got?
Sure. So the big thing is kind of what a lot of people in the community have been waiting for with bated breath, which is the release of the first official FAQ for the game, which lists a little bit of errata, so some changes to the actual text of cards, and then kind of addressing some rules issues that have come up as people have been kind of flooding the design team with rules questions since before the game was even released. So the good aspect of that is they've had a lot of time to kind of think about these issues and then address them in this FAQ. So I don't think we're going to go through every single thing because you can, go look at it and read it for yourself. But
I think a lot of the frequently asked questions, like if you've been on BGG or the FFG forums, or the Arkham Facebook page, you've seen these questions. You've seen most of these questions.
Right. So I think we're just going to kind of hit on the big ones, including some that were ruled one way originally, and then this FAQ has changed it. And one of them was actually featured in one of the playthrough videos we did, and this is the issue
it sure was.
of weakness cards. So if you remember...
Thanks, Matt, for giving us that giant asterisk.
Take your mental trauma, Nick.
Yeah.
No, we snuck in the window, so it's fine. But
right, totally legal.
If you remember, originally the ruling was that if you have a weakness, kind of one of these special weaknesses that is sitting in your play area in the board somewhere, and then it gives you a mental trauma when the game is over. Well, the original ruling was if you resigned, that would just go away instead of actually hitting you with the trauma because of the way the weakness rules were worded.
It really, I was kind of okay with it. It seemed like a real, sleazebag thing to do. It really felt like we were cheesing the rules, and then when it came out that that was okay, I'm like, oh, all right. Without guilt now. GTFO.
So basically, with the change, so like you said, originally they said that was fine, but they've actually changed it and kind of did an alteration of the rules now, so that the rules say you actually, as part of resigning, resolve those weaknesses. So you will take the trauma from cover up or whatever the case may be as part of resigning. So there's no easy way out now.
Well, that makes sense, because if you bail on whatever scene or information you're trying to cover up, then it doesn't get covered up. So
I think you could argue theme both ways, though. I mean, you're running
I think
off
you're about to
go cover up something else, I don't know.
Yeah. All I know is that this is pretty much another reinforcement for Jim Culver as having the best signature weakness, because it hits the table, boom, and then it's done. It's not going to sit in play and run the risk of running into these weird rules questions. You know what it does, and that's it.
Hits the table, kills you, leave. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my god. I was playing a game the other night with my friend Dave, who is notorious for pulling tentacles. And sure enough, playing Jim, pulled tentacle, pulled skull, then pulled the other two tokens. It was like they were in line.
I think he needs to go see a witch doctor and get some curse removed from him at this point.
It was amazing. We still made it through, but oh god, it was so cool.
Because I was just about to say, I've been playing Jim recently, and I think the most I've ever got hit is 1 token out of 5. So
yep, same here. 1.
Though I will say, given we just kind of understand the law of averages, and accept that it's a thing that actually exists regardless of our own individual experiences, I would agree that Jim Culver's signature weakness is the softest.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess the issue with these kind of weaknesses like cover up and searching for Izzy is they are so timing dependent. I mean, I guess weaknesses in general are, but like if they hit you like the last couple turns, I mean, there's just nothing you can do. You just eat the trauma. It basically, the text just reads take a trauma by that point.
You know what I've been doing in my Zoe deck to ensure that doesn't happen? I'm splashing elusive.
Oh.
Yeah. And I would actually, even aside from the weakness implication, I would consider splashing elusive in any investigator who can take it, because it's like there are so many situations where that card is just awesome.
Yeah,
it is invaluable in Jenny's deck when her weakness comes up, because you could potentially take care of that weakness and still have an action to spare the turn it comes up.
It's
potentially
fast, bro.
If you're hanging on.
You can still have a whole turn left. If you go there and then resolve it, I'm with you.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then play your second elusive.
Yeah, it's invaluable for Jenny. And then and then get out of there. Get back to the resign location or whatever.
Bamf.
Yeah, because otherwise it can be rough if it's like 3 locations away. That's like 3 actions just to get there, assuming you don't have to evade or fight anyone, and it's just can be nasty.
We never want to assume that.
Yeah, never assume that. So other than weaknesses, some of the other notable things in the FAQ, and you guys can remind me if I forget anything, but one thing was kind of clarifying who can interact with weaknesses and kind of scenario cards in your threat area if you're playing multiplayer. So the FAQ kind of clarifies that other players can take those actions or free triggers, whatever they may be, on encounter cards, scenario cards that are in your threat area. So they can actually help you, if it's like action, test, whatever to get rid of this, or, double action, get rid of it. Another investigator can come along and help you with those, which isn't necessarily obvious at first glance.
Totally
I was only ever thinking about like skids, like, oh, someone else could pay off his hospital debts, but I wasn't even thinking about like if you get internal injury, someone else can come and put a tourniquet on that gut wound for you.
If you get paranoia, someone can come and like pat you on the back. No, chronophobia.
It's okay.
Yeah, I think at some point in the chat we were saying each action is a slap, so double action is a slap to each cheek.
It's a there on top of the head.
Good luck, she's getting hysterical. It was the 20s. I'm sure things like that happened.
But I like that ruling. I think it adds some more strategy of like, oh, is the other player going to waste time helping you out, or are they going to do whatever they're doing? So
yeah, totally.
Makes sense to me.
All right.
So that was kind of that issue. It goes into some smaller things of like who is referenced by you, but I don't really feel like going into that right now, unless you guys do. Some of the other major ones, when do additional costs get paid? So cards that ask you, when you enter this location, you must do this, or you must do this extra cost to investigate this location, whatever the case may be. The clarification now is that you have to pay those basically whenever you encounter them. So the example they use in the FAQ is if you're using our good friend Duke to move and then investigate, and then you flip that location and it tells you, oh, to investigate, you have to do this extra thing. You have to do it at that moment. And if you can't satisfy it, then it fizzles.
Yeah, see, I was in the camp where I was cheesing that, where I was saying like, oh, well, since it wasn't required at the time I paid the cost of the action, I'm not going to do it. And it turns out, you've got to pay the bill.
Yeah, that one was tricky for sure, because it's like when, is it asking you at the time you initiate it, or when you face plan into it? So good to know. Were there other major ones that stood out to you guys?
I think one for me that wasn't initially intuitive, though obviously understandable, was that heal is actually, it's been clarified that it is shorthand for heal damage or horror from your investigator. It doesn't allow you to heal anything from any assets that you might have with damage or horror unless it specifies it. Like, what's the one we just got? Emergency
aid.
aid? Yeah.
The one with the
Specifically
crazy art.
says asset. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone tried to convince me that it's Bill Murray. I'm not quite sure I see it.
It looks like the most horrific injury ever, and that person is just like dabbing it like so gently, like there.
Mm-hmm.
It's taking two actions. There.
Yeah, there. What's your professional opinion on that, Scott? You think that's going to have any effect?
No. Slapping wounds seems like a really bad idea.
Slapping wounds. You feel that?
Unless
you
you've
still
got
feel
antiseptic. And then I think the only other one that I wanted to bring up, just because it's pretty important for Agnes players out there, so this is a PSA for you Agnes players. It was clarified when you receive the horror for shriveling when you pull a symbol token. And that horror, turns out, is applied immediately after the token is revealed. So if you're playing Agnes and she takes a horror and does a damage with her ability, that damage is placed first, and then the rest of the damage is placed. And if you're playing anyone else and that horror is the horror that makes you go insane, you don't land the damage afterward.
But I believe also, like, let's say you're playing solo Rougarou, and he takes that single damage, and then runs away. The damage from the shriveling, if it's successful, still gets applied. I believe that was ruled. Because that's one thing that could change. Like, you draw a skull in the shriveling, you take a damage with Agnes, you ping the Rougarou, he runs away, but you're still successful. I believe Matt said that the attack is still
even
successful.
Though it's... Yeah, so basically the attack still resolves even though they've moved locations.
Yeah, like, you kind of got, like, you shot him as he's going away, or you shriveled him
right.
as he's going away.
It's a heat-seeking shriveling.
Yes, it followed him.
That doesn't surprise me. There's a very similar ruling in Lord of the Rings where if an enemy was attacking you and the enemy moved play areas, like someone else did a trigger to engage or push back to the staging area, you don't cheese out of that attack. You still take it. So at least it's symmetrical across games that way. For what comfort that is.
Yeah, there was also the clarification of like effects if it's triggering off of being successful at something like Dr. Milan, then that triggers in step 6. So there's actually a kind of differentiation between step 6, which is just checking did you succeed, yes or no, and then step 7 when you apply the success or failure of whatever test that is. I feel like that one's gonna keep confusing me and possibly other people for a while because a lot of cards are kind of the wording is pretty close, like after successfully investigating, or if the test is successful, do this. But there's kind of a small distinction there.
I'm totally in agreement with you, Ian. I think if there's any mechanic in this game that's going to be problematic down the road, it's the resolution of a skill test. With all the different triggers that can possibly come from what happens in a skill test.
And the big thing in the FAQ was the on that topic, double or nothing. Like, what gets doubled and what doesn't. What's the effect of the test and what isn't. Like, Vicious Blow adding a damage does get doubled, but drawing a card off a skill test does not get doubled. Off one of the neutral skills. So. But that is
interesting.
Super complicated, and you should go read the FAQ.
Yes, do that. Oh, also, check out the nested trigger section because the example they use is so goddamn sexy. I am not even into that kind of rules stuff, but I was reading that section, I'm like, and then that triggers. But that's going to react there. But this has to resolve and trigger. But it reacts and then it triggers. And then this other thing that started but hasn't yet resolved. And that resolves. Oh, God. And it's a thing. Go read it.
Then you had to light up a cigarette afterwards. Is it sexier than Michael Bolton's Valentine special on Netflix? That's the real question.
I haven't seen it. I can't confirm, but I'm not hopeful.
You can always read it while watching that and get the best of both worlds.
Oh boy. That's too much. All right. Any other comments or PSAs from the old FAQ drop in here?
No? Read it now while it's only a few pages long, because it'll be longer in the future.
Yes.
What are we at for Lord of the Rings now? We have like 17 pages?
Something like that, yeah.
I think it's the FAQ library now for Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Order Tome 1 of the LOD FAQ.
Volume 1.
Just pay 3 easy payments of $29.95 plus shipping and handling.
And get the free collector's mug.
All right, guys, so let's talk Dunwich. So, like we did for the core set, we plan to talk about each of the scenarios in the Dunwich Legacy. So, obviously, encounter spoiler alert. This discussion will assume that you have played through the Dunwich Legacy box and are privy to or are okay hearing about all the potential resolutions and things that can happen. Also, we are probably going to mention player cards from things as far as the Miskatonic Museum, because that's where we're at release-wise. But we've gotten the sense that no one really cares about player card spoilers, so. But just an FYI there. So the Dunwich Legacy. Sadly, it seems like not everyone has been able to get their hands on it.
Yeah.
FFG has kind of, unfortunately, it seems they've gotten pretty good about stoking the marketing train full of coal and then not quite making sure that the freight cars are amply stoked with product. But I have loved this box. Logistical issues aside, I feel like it's a great way to start out kind of the expansions to the game. I'm glad that they went the opposite route from Lord of the Rings, where it went from the core set straight into a cycle of packs. We would call them Mythos packs in this game. They're adventure packs in Lord of the Rings. And then after that cycle of packs, we had our first deluxe. It's really cool to get the deluxe first in this game and get that new influx of a greater amount of player cards, I think.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agreed, yes.
And then it's also kind of interesting because it seems like we're not going to be getting investigators in Mythos packs. Based on this early impression, I've gotten the impression that we are only ever going to get investigators in deluxe boxes unless they decide to change something going forward. But yeah, so what are your guys' general impressions on the box? Or maybe we should save that to the end. Let's talk about player cards. What are your general impressions on the player cards in the box?
Fire axe. Maybe one of the best weapons available.
I really like fire axe. I don't know that I'm as positive on it as everyone else seems to be.
It's just
and it might,
wrong.
and this might be getting back to why I'm not as positive on the skill pump assets, the skill pump trait skills. Abilities? What are those? They're assets. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not as positive on those either. Maybe I'm just building my decks with too high a cost curve. My issue with
fire axe.
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, I want to like it more than I do, because when I first read it, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Spend resources to buff your attack in the card itself. You don't need anything else. And then when you're out of resources, deal an extra damage. But the few times that I've actually used it, I've always had too many resources to where it's like, well, okay, I don't really want to make my attack plus 12, so I guess I'll just spend 2 resources and make 2 different attacks. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of wish that damage...
It kind of almost requires a deck that hovers around 0 resources, right? Like, you always have to be within striking distance of that damage bonus. Because, like, that's my thing, is when I take a weapon, I generally take it for the damage bonus. Yes. At this point in the game, with hit points where they're at and trying to get rid of enemies as quickly as possible, I tend to take a weapon because I want to deal out more damage with a single action, not necessarily because I'm worried about being able to hit the enemy to begin with. That's where other cards come in. But I do like it, because if you have a deck that can hover successfully around 0, and if any faction can do it at this point, it's Survivor, then it's a solid card. Yeah. So I don't hate it, but I'm not giving it the universal praise that it seems to be getting elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think the good thing is all the weapons kind of have these limitations on them, so I think Fire Axe is kind of in the the good camp, which I'll put it, as opposed to some of the other weapons, like Switchblade, etc. But yeah, there's definitely some finesse to using the fire axe. It's not as just like straight ahead as something like the machete, I would argue.
But I love the design, like the whole thing where you're just basically you're deciding how hard you're going to swing, and then if you're desperate enough, you have no resources, then you do that extra damage.
Yeah, the good thing about the fire axe is, excuse me, I've used it with like Rex, and then even if I'm not getting the damage bonus, if it's like a 2-player, 2-handed game, at least he can pump up his combat by enough to help out and help take down an enemy.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, is if you've got kind of an investigator like Rex who doesn't have a whole lot in faction, fire axe is a great splash.
Yes.
Way better than something like a baseball bat, for instance.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll throw another one out there that I thought was pretty epic. Rite of Seeking, man. For Seekers, especially non-Agnes Seekers who don't have access to Lucky and Look What I Found. Like, man, that took investigating up to 11.
Yeah, it's huge for Mystic.
You mean for Mystics or for Seekers?
Oh, did I say Seeker? Sorry, Mystics, of course.
Yeah, you said Seekers, so I was confused. I was like, I would not put that in a Seeker deck, but yes, no, Rite of Seeking is pretty good for anybody, especially from that Dunwich Legacy, from the Dunwich cycle, who doesn't have decent intellect.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys ever had it shut your turn down? Oh, wow. Scott, you ask your question.
Oh, I was going to say, I find the cost of 4 a bit high.
Okay.
But it's still good. But the 4 is like, I'm just like, oh man, that is a lot of money.
It's a hit. It's a hit.
Yeah.
The thing I like is for Jim, who I've been playing a bit recently, is he already has a decent kind of starting intellect at 3. So he can do some investigating without the Rite of Seeking, but then that helps like up his game for, you know, higher shroud locations, or when he needs to just like take off a couple clues at once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, so Fire Axe, Rite of Seeking. Nick, you got one of note?
I would like to say that I think Peter Sylvester is now the third part of our holy trinity of awesome allies, being Leo DeLuca, Dr. Milan, and Peter Sylvester, because that guy.
You mean Agnes's main squeeze?
Oh, you mean Zoe's main squeeze? Because, like, having that 2 extra sanity and then the automatic healing of 1 horror is huge for Zoe. Absolutely huge. And really, he's good with anybody who... Well, you're going to be taking horror with everybody. But yeah definitely. Mystics use him a lot. You can throw him into a Survivor deck, and he's going to pull his weight. Any deck, he's going to pull his weight. So Peter Sylvester, amazing. And then when you upgrade him, my god. His
upgrade version is just insane. Like,
yeah, yes. that's Agnes's boyfriend right there.
Or not insane, I guess. But...
so good.
And he only costs 3, which is the crazy part. Like,
right?
Yeah, he's real good.
3 and for 2 permanent stat boosts, in addition to being a horror sponge. Like,
So with Agnes, now with Miskatonic out, there's that junky Agnes build, which uses smoking pipe and painkillers as well. So between smoking pipe, painkillers, and Pete, you can basically get free damage and then never have to pay for it, because you take the horror on Agnes, and then you take the oh wait, how does this work? I had this working the other day. What order does this have to occur in, guys?
I don't know. I don't play Agnes.
There it is. Okay, so you take the horror with Agnes, do the damage. You smoking pipe the damage. God, what is it? You take the horror off with smoking pipe, but take a damage, and then you use painkillers to put a horror on Pete and remove the damage from Agnes, and then Pete heals the horror off, and you end at a net neutral effect for all that shucking and jiving. It's so cool.
A lot of actions to do that, though.
It's all free actions, except for whatever you did to take horror.
Wait, smoking pipe and painkillers are free actions?
They sure are.
I gotta use those more. Holy crap.
Yeah, they're real good. So in my headcanon, like, Agnes is, in...
a junkie.
Well, no, she's like self-medicating because she's having all these visions.
Yeah, a junkie.
And she's
that's...
well, right. But for a different reason, Scott, it's cool, okay?
Everyone has a different
she's a
reason,
sorceress.
Sean.
And then she's getting
Anyway.
some college football player hooked on painkillers.
Yes! And then she finds solace in this college football player who goes gallivanting. Or I don't know. There's a fan
And
fiction
Aggie
to be
sounds
written
kind of
there.
trashy.
Oh boy.
It's a gritty reimagining, Nick. Isn't that what everyone's into nowadays? Ian, how about you? You got any special mentions? Did we lose Ian?
We may have.
Uh-oh. No, he just muted himself. All right,
Oh.
so we'll move on from there. So talking then about the scenarios. So let's take a quick little vote here and determine who did what first and which one we're going to discuss first. So the first time you sat down to Dunwich and you read that opening splay about trying to find Rice and Morgan, which one did you elect to do first the first time?
I went to the Clover Club. So that
Likewise.
was-
First time was in that 4-player game that you were part of, Sean, and
That we
did
played?
extracurricular.
Yep,
Mhm.
okay.
So we went EA first.
Okay, so let's talk The House Always Wins. So this one's pretty cool, I think. I always enjoy it. The one kind of, I don't know, kind of interesting piece about it is that it really turns traditional investigating on its head for a large portion of it,
Mhm.
where you'll maybe have a Rex or a Daisy or someone who's very clue houndy, and they can be sitting in Act 1 just going like, I'm going to twiddle my thumbs here because I either need to get money to gamble or take a risk on having a drink, but there's really no other clues to be had until you get a little bit farther. But at the same
Right.
time, I do appreciate that variety in clue acquisition.
Yeah, I did like the idea behind it. I think the gambling for clues, like my wife and I played once, and she had the worst luck, and it was just like we spent 2 full turns just grabbing tokens from the bag. Like, we just need to win one time, and so I like the idea of it, but I had that negative play experience with it, so.
Yeah, well, and God, I have a 2-handed Rex and Zoe campaign that I busted through the other night, and I just happened to draw all my allies, so I just camped out in the lounge and was like, all right, ally, boom, move on to the next one, and then Zoe moved in, ally, boom, move on to the next one, and having the ability to do that really moved that first act forward. So maybe don't shy away from extra allies when you're playing Dunwich Legacy.
Yeah. I did
Because
like,
there's that use at least.
I did like the feeling that it evoked. Like, once you kind of started moving through it and you went into the back hallway, and then there was like this dark area and there's like 3 rooms. You're like, I actually felt like I was going into the bowels of this Clover Club. So the theme
And
of
I
it,
love,
like,
yes, the theme is great.
Oh,
all the enemies
yes.
gaining aloof for the first agenda
yeah,
is so cool because it's like you see them and they're moving around and you realize that they're going to be a threat.
Yeah.
But if you don't start shit, they're not coming after you. So I don't know. It was a new feeling for the game that I don't think we'd hit yet.
Yeah, I think of the regular scenarios, the non-side stuff. It's one of my favorites. I was no surprise. I was excited for Clover Club going into it, and then it definitely hit things for me. But it can be a bit wonky because it kind of throws off what you're usually doing with your deck, especially in terms of investigation.
Mm-hmm. So how reckless are you guys with taking a drink? Do you avoid it at all costs, or are you just like, no, let's go there, let's aggro it? Just
I usually
drinks.
pound it
Everyone
first thing into the bar.
Yeah,
Right away.
It's pretty much the first thing to do. Yep.
See, I'm a little more conservative. To me, what it gears on is whether or not I have that ally in my hand to leverage the ability on the lounge. If I have the ally, I'll probably skip the drink until we get into desperate times. But yeah, I don't know. So I think talking strategy. So if we're going Clover Club, let's talk let's talk about going Clover Club first, because what's interesting about these scenarios is whether you hit them first or second. There's a bit of nuance that changes. So pretend we're going there first, and we have the ability to rescue Dr. Morgan?
Francis Morgan.
Yep.
Yeah. The fighty one.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, Rice, is the investigating one. Kind of, I guess, what do you do? When it first opens up, what's your priority? Besides going and pounding a drink.
Pounding a drink first. Taking the edge off.
Well, yeah.
It depends on if I have an ally in my hand. I generally try to do the gambling first, because if I remember correctly, that's the one that connects with the darkened hallway. So I want to make sure if I'm going to use that to get the clues, I get the clues there, and then I can travel right away to the final clues there, rather, and then I can travel right to the hallway.
Has anyone ever gone just completely aggro and just tried to take down the pit boss straight away?
No, I have not. I've thought about it many a time, but I haven't actually pulled the trigger on it.
I've thought about it when there were like 3 gangsters in one location and the dynamite blast was just staring at me in the face.
That's a tempting moment where you're just like,
What now, hey?
Okay, so then once you get your requisite clues, you get through Act 1, now the back alley opens up. How does that generally go for you guys? Do you generally find yourself a little ahead of the curve where you have the time to explore the extra rooms and get the VP? Or are you generally in like get Rice and get out mode? Get Morgan and get out mode.
I found I was usually pretty open to exploring the other rooms. Like, I feel like I had time issues usually, especially if we kind of split the party, which I felt was okay because you're just one location away from each other.
Sure.
But, yeah, I think there was only, I think I played it 4 times. There was only once, but that was because the whole gambling thing went wrong, that I was very pressed for time. I basically had to, like, grab him off his chair and just run out the back.
Does anyone... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
I've mostly played it solo, and I've found, like, usually I'll have, like, 1 or 2 turns left when I get into the darkened hallway before it advances and they lose the aloof. I've found kind of in solo the big strategic thing for me is figuring out, like, I know I'll get to Morgan eventually and try to get him, but when I'm going to try to deal with the pit boss because he's going to come after you, and then also being very aware of the one treachery, which I can't remember off the top of my head the name, but the one that makes the gangsters move and then
Hunted down.
Yep.
Move and then attack you if they engage. And because that one, if you kind of let gangsters pile up, I've definitely been hurt badly by that a couple times where I've gotten swarmed by like 2 or 3 enemies, which in solo with a certain investigator can be really,
also,
really bad.
Gangster Pile Up was the name of my high school rap rock project. So when the beat drops in this scenario and the monsters come out, like, okay, so I asked how that goes for you guys. I'm gonna completely simplify my interpretation of this scenario. I have 2 kinds of experiences in The House Always Wins. I have the experience where I'm totally cool that the Servant of the Lurker showed up, and I have the experience where I'm totally pissed off that the Servant of the Lurker showed up. And those are my experiences. Because you're either ahead, like in my experience, I've either been really ahead of the enemies and I'm exploring the locations. I'm like, yeah, another XP. Come on, servant. Or I have the ones where I'm super behind and then the servant comes out anyway. And it's like, oh, I wish you were a blob.
Well,
I'm gathering that reflects your guys' experience entirely.
I think it is kind of a... How do I want to say, like a kind of binary scenario in the way you're saying that sometimes things are just clicking and you go and then I'll have the hunted down plays where I'm just getting hosed every way. And some of that might depend on how the gambling goes earlier and how there's just like a lot of factors that go into it. The one kind of game that sticks out to me is I was playing, 2-player campaign with a buddy of mine against this, and then we were getting so bogged down in the opening part, and then the stupid blobs came, pulled out by the agenda, and then in the next Mythos phase, I drew a second blob engaged with me.
Oh, man.
Now, the problem there was I was playing as Zoe, and we had taken a break a little bit ago, but before this to get food or whatever, and I was telling my friend about how, I'm playing this deck thematic, and I don't want to throw any, like, firearms in there, because I imagine Zoe is totally just a melee girl, she just uses axes and knives, and then these stupid enemies come out that eat your weapons, and, that was
there's
ugly.
Your problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stupid theme.
Yeah. Theme.
You know what the theme of this deck is? Scott?
I don't know.
Oh, well, it's your damn saying, God. I built a theme deck.
Oh, yes.
The theme of this deck is good cards.
It's 30 good cards. Yeah.
That'd have been funnier if you remembered right away.
Yeah.
It would have. You failed me, Scott.
Sorry, dropped the ball.
Drew the tentacle.
You put me on a spot. I agree with your assessment, though, Sean. I found that this scenario was very either, hey, everything's going great, getting clues, back rooms, everything like that, and like that big monster crashes through. You're like, yeah, eat those guys, I don't care. And then there's the other, when you show up, it's like, wow, I can't draw a token to save my life, and I'm scrambling, and then all of a sudden all the criminals show up, and I'm just like, well, that happened. So
yeah, that sure happened. That's how I end a lot of my Arkham scenarios.
Yeah, that was a thing. Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the scenario, though, is the fact that the monsters can eat the gangsters and eat them. That is another amazing theme win to the scenario. So that was another fun part of that game. Even though I was kind of getting hosed, my buddy was engaged with the pit boss. I went and engaged him and then moved the pit boss with me over to the blob so that he would get eaten. So I just imagine Zoe like putting him in a headlock and dragging him over there.
Yeah.
Nice. Here you go. Give him a kick on the butt.
That's my big takeaway memory from this scenario. Is the very first time we played it as part of that 4-player game. I was playing Zoe.
Oh shit, I'm looking at that picture right now. Tell the story.
And it was, I think of another investigator at my location had an enemy, so I optionally engaged it, moved, and then I played taunt to pull a couple others off of another person, and then
you pulled
I took a bunch of hits,
didn't you?
But then, yeah, I think I had 3 or 4 gangsters, but then once the enemy phase hit, I only had the conglomeration of spheres to deal with, and I was like, well, that felt pretty good. So I haven't had another situation like that, but
it was like a Zoe best scenario situation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Here, let me drop that picture into the old Discord here. It was pretty awesome. Yeah, tanking in this game it's an interesting topic. We might want to talk about it as a podcast topic itself one day, but just the concept of what is tanking in this game is interesting. But I feel like Zoe is probably one of the better tanks we have at the moment.
So when you say tank, because I kind of confuse this in my own mind.
Right.
Do you mean someone
I don't know what I mean either.
Okay, do you mean someone who can take a lot of hits? Or are you saying about someone who is like strong like a tank and just going to blow the crap out of enemies?
When I
say
use
tank,
the term, it's take.
Yeah, I would agree with
ahead,
Nick. It's take a bunch of hits. So the whole idea is that you are drawing the aggression of the enemies toward yourself and away from others. That's what I hear when I hear tank.
Okay. Because I would argue that the survivor class between Leather Coat and Big Man on Campus, Peter Sylvester,
and Wendy.
Yeah.
Wendy's a phenomenal dodge tank.
Yeah. But that is a very interesting topic for another time.
Yes. Okay, so any other thoughts on The House Always Wins before we move it right along?
I think the general...
Go ahead, Nick.
No, you formed your thought earlier, so go ahead, Ian.
I think the general strategy for me, at least on solo, has just been move through quickly to the back area and give yourself some breathing room, which I guess could apply to a lot of scenarios. But one of the cards, since I had to mute myself earlier and I didn't mention one of the Dunwich cards I've grown to love, is Shortcut. which I found myself splashing into some off-class decks because it's zero cost, fast, and it just moves you to the next location. That seems super simple, and you might look at it and say, it's not worth a card slot, but it can really make you move faster and get you out of some situations.
It's kind of amazing how often you end up one action short of what you're trying to do.
And how often?
A lot.
And how often is that including a move? Like, you're like, I just need to move to this location and then do 3 things. You're like, yeah.
Yep. I feel like that card
So when it comes to
is good. Go on.
The house always wins. I know that I think we kind of unofficially agreed that our preferred method of play is house always wins and then extracurricular activity. However...
Well, that's what we all played first. I don't know that we landed on preference.
Yeah.
Preference.
Well, talking about the house always wins when you play it second, last night, and I know we did this again during our big 4-player game when I first encountered it, but so when you play it second, instead of Morgan, you have Peter Clover as your asset, who is your potential target to save. And I've only had him come out twice, and it was once in the 4-player game and once in our 3-player game last night, and neither time were we able to get him because it just seemed like he's too far away and there's too much of a time on it because every turn he's taking a damage and there's enemies in the way most likely, and it's just, are we going to be able to get over there, get him, and get out?
Yeah.
And it just seemed too difficult to do. And since he had come up twice and I hadn't gotten him either time, I'm like, I'm just gonna cheat and look up what happens when you get him. Like, what's the significance? Has anyone here gotten him or looked up what happens when you get him?
No,
I
I'm not a
have
cheater.
one campaign where I got him.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, I think, because I've usually always played house first. I think there's only a couple times where he's come out and I have not got him. I'm trying to remember. I think it was either Ashcan or Jenny, and he was like 3 or 4 locations away with 3 or 4 enemies in the way. And it's just like, you do the math of how many actions that could take in a best case scenario, and it's just no way to do it. So I think... thinking through it, I think the only way I can think of getting it reliably is having those 2 copies of Elusive teleporting in, hoping there's a location nearby with no enemies, because you need that to use Elusive, getting him and then elusiving back out. Elusiving is now a verb, but I think that's one of the only reliable ways I could see of doing it.
Right. But after seeing the story implications for after you save them, I'm very interested to try and pursue that in a future playthrough.
Yep. So we've given the spoiler alert then, Nick. So why don't you lay it out for everyone what happens?
So every outcome for the house always wins ends with the O'Banian gang has a bone to pick with the investigators. Every single outcome has that, except for if you succeed, if you resign, the house always wins with Peter Clover under your control. Then it's the O'Banian gang has the investigators back. And that, like, the fact that we don't know what that's going to trigger later on in the campaign, and that it goes from them being an active threat to them being a potential ally, like, that seems really interesting to me. So I really want to explore that and see if I can get that result for a future playthrough.
Yeah.
I hope we get some badass, like, encounter ally. Like some musclehead that helps us out for a scenario or two. That'd be real cool.
Someone like the pit boss, but now he's with you. Oh, that'd be sick.
Yeah.
The redeemed pit boss.
Our pit boss.
Well, the cool thing about... maybe this is jumping ahead a little bit. We can talk about it more later. But the cool thing about how this Dunwich is set up because of the different orders is that it doesn't seem... There's not like a perfect playthrough where you get everything. Like, you're gonna, presumably the O'Banian gang having a bone to pick with you is bad. I'll go out on a limb and say that. Yeah. And so, either you're gonna get them having your back, but then that means Morgan is kidnapped, which is also presumably bad. So basically, there's no, like, perfect run, which I think is cool. Like, it's a story. There's gonna be some bad resolution along the way.
So, time will tell whether that's the better play. Right now, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but right now I feel like it's the better play to play the house always wins first, because you don't get anything immediate out of Peter Clover, but
Yeah.
I'm super interested to see how that plays out too. All right. So then moving on to extracurricular activity. We get our first tour of that single location we had in the Midnight Mass, and that is the Miskatonic University. I imagine it's not going to be our first time, or sorry, rather, our last time going there. It's kind of a thing. At least in Lovecraft, I don't know how much the Arkham files specifically leverage it, but I feel like it's a thing.
Frequently, I'd say.
Yeah, so Scott, why don't you open us up on this one? Because I know this one was particularly tickled you.
Yeah, this one was my favorite one. It may be my favorite campaign-esque scenario, not including the print-on-demands, currently out. Because I was playing it, I'm like, oh, this is cool. We're exploring a university. It looks like, I go to this location, and there's a locked location over here. I'm like, that's cool. And I wasn't really getting what the encounter deck was trying to do until, and it's like, oh, discard a couple cards. Whatever. I'm like, and in my mind as a competitive player, I'm like, those 3 cards off the top of my deck, they could have been anywhere in my deck. I'm totally okay with discarding cards as a cost or whatever. And then I got the treachery that goes in your play area. It's like, if your deck is empty, take 10 damage. And I was like, oh, that's a problem. That's a big problem. And the fact
is that Beyond the Veil? Is that the one that actually triggers the damage when you deck out?
I think so. And the fact the encounter deck was trying to mill me it just blew my mind, because all of a sudden, all my neutral skill cards, I was like, oh, I don't want to pass this test with a neutral skill card. And I was playing, I think it was a Wendy solo deck, or maybe a Duke or Wendy, I forget which, and I packed tons of, anything that drew me a card, I'm like, that's a good card. In the theme deck it goes. And that theme
the ironic theme deck.
Yeah. So, I love that. I love the idea of the locked doors, and you have to find the janitor, and he can unlock the doors for you. That themey part of it, I loved it. And I think both these scenarios in the box really excelled at just dripping theme, you actually felt like you were doing what your character was doing in the scenario. So,
yeah. Yeah, I definitely like it overall. I'd say I have one gripe, it's just sometimes, and it's not like a deal breaker for me, but sometimes the horrible hand of fate makes it so that Jazz is at the bottom of the encounter deck.
Oh my god, he's been in my bottom 5 cards 7 of the 8 times I've played this thing.
I think there's some kind of magnet in the card that draws him to the bottom somehow.
He's heavier than the rest of them.
Yeah. Made of depleted uranium.
Now, Sean, in the one we played, he was the top card.
Well, that was the 8. That was the 1 out of 8.
Yeah.
But the other thing is just the way mathematically this works. 2-player is the worst spot to be in to find him.
Yes.
I would argue. I actually haven't run the numbers because I don't do that. I work on gut feel. And that's never bit me in the ass ever, I promise. But I feel like the 2 players is the worst place to be. Because with 1 player, you get 10 cards discarded per clue.
Right.
And at 4-player, you get 5 per clue, but you're also revealing 4 cards per Mythos phase, if not more. So you're just churning through the deck on both ends. 3-player, you could probably argue it, but you're still seeing more cards. But 2-player, you're only getting 5 cards per clue, and you're only seeing 2 per Mythos phase.
2 is
if he's in the bottom of the damn deck, it can take you almost every clue on the board to find him.
Yeah. I like how they balanced that for single player, because I felt like I had a chance. Because if it was only 5 cards,
oh god,
I wouldn't even play it.
Yeah.
That would be such a thing.
I'd just be like, I guess he starts in play.
So, kind of what I'll put it to you again. Kind of, what's your overall strategy? I think this one's a little bit more of an open map than the house always wins. Where do you guys tend to go first when you start out in the quad and you have to walk through the guys with the hacky sacks and the frisbees?
Avoid the library.
Yeah. I don't go to the library.
Right, yeah, just avoid it. Unless locked doors are holding everything else down, I just stay away from the library.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends on the investigator, but I tend to try it. Victory points.
Yeah, which is nice, but the last 2 times that I've played this scenario, we've had Rex stuck in the library with a locked door and arcane barrier, and it's like, well, I guess you're not doing anything at all.
Yeah.
So that wasn't very fun, but...
We're just going to move the library.
That combo's pretty rough.
Just going to move the library and all these cards into the void, and you can play over here, Rex.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I usually start either at the humanities building because that's the one that discards cards from your deck based on horror, and presumably at the very beginning you're not going to have any, so it won't have any effect. Or if my investigator doesn't have a good start on kind of getting their investigation tools, I'll go to the student union because that was kind of the lowest shroud, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I think that sucker's a 1.
Yeah. So those are usually one of those two is my kind of starting spot, I think.
Do you guys tend, and this is probably more a general question than anything, but do you guys tend to advance straight away when you have the clues? Is there anything that holds you back from doing that?
I'm
trying to think in this one. I don't think there's anything that benefits it.
No, I think I will. If I have enough clues to advance, but there's like 2 clues that are easy pickings next turn, I won't advance till I get those, so I have like 2 clues ready to search through the deck for what's his name? Jazz. So
Jazz Mulligan.
Jazz Mulligan. What a great name.
It's a really cool name. That dude needs to play trumpet in a band.
It's perfect.
Jim's dad.
Yeah, so I agree about the humanities building being an early target, though. I think that's one of the only kind of, for sure, general tips that I could give is like go there early because later you might not want to go there at all.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, how did you guys, obviously the main strategy of the encounter deck in this game, as Scott was talking about in this scenario, is milling your deck. So have you guys done anything different to deal with the milling?
Just go faster.
just play faster. Just play better. Play faster.
Yeah.
Get good.
That's what the internet told me to do. I think the only other thing is I tend not to draw for actions.
Yeah.
Where otherwise I probably would.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't know that I build anything differently or I guess play differently. I would say the treacheries in this scenario are not really ones that you can, at least not ones that I've found myself successfully playing around. They just kind of happen to you, and hopefully you're in the right place for them.
I definitely save my Ward of Protection specifically for the if your deck is empty, you get dead card.
Yeah.
So it's like every other treachery, I'm like, well, I guess that's happening, but that specific one. And I've had it where I've actually emptied my deck and not had it, took a sanity, and reshuffled my deck, and I was like, yeah. Me, good luck. Oh, it was so
That's a freebie.
That actually happened to me with Jim, where I was doing terribly with the deck milling me through the special tokens and the treachery that you have to test, and then it discards.
Visions of future past.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I pulled so many goddamn tentacles on that treachery.
I hit a tentacle on one and a -4 on another, and I was just tearing through the deck. So I was like, you know what? I am just going to accelerate this process before that stupid treachery comes out to hit me. And so I just started drawing through it to try to get to the end and shuffle. Although I wasn't completely crazy because I did have the Ward of Protection to cancel it out. And lo and behold, as soon as I emptied out the player deck during the next Mythos phase, that's when that treachery popped out. And so I was able to cancel it. But yeah, I guess that's the closest I've come to strategy, is just trying to intentionally mill myself to make sure it doesn't hit at the wrong time. But
okay, good. I'm glad someone else brought that up, because I too took on that strategy. It just happened not to work. It was the thing where I had, I think, like 6 cards left in my deck, and I hadn't drawn Beyond the Veil yet. So I didn't have it hanging there, but I'm like, God, I know I'm going to get it at this point. So I'm just going to draw. So I drew 3 on one turn, and then I had a neutral card, so I knew I could do a test and still draw a card the next turn. Well, guess what I found in the Mythos phase.
Of course.
Yep.
So we had
to
I had to resign. Is there okay? Odd aside, in what scenario, with what characters and what in play, can you survive the 10 damage?
I was just thinking that to myself.
My gosh.
Yeah.
So obviously, bulletproof
Roland
vest
with
is
a
big.
with a bulletproof vest.
Brother Xavier now adds a hearty chunk of hit points.
Yeah. I think Morgan himself has 4, right? If you have him in your deck.
So essentially, you need 11 hit points to spare to live through that decking happening.
Yes.
Well, if you have a guard dog out.
Well, what about when you get charisma and have 2 big beefy allies out?
There you go.
Guard dog and guard dog.
Brother Xavier and
Charisma
Brother
should be dog
Xavier.
person.
Second one spelled with the Z.
One thing I did love about this milling mechanic, and I saw someone mention it on Facebook, and I made a meme that I'm putting in the live podcast chat. But when the deck mills you, and the first 3 cards you flip, 2 of them are your 2 weaknesses.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my god. Oh,
that face I make.
That is just. I love that.
Yeah, and as long as we're talking about fun treacheries, I'm going to give a special mention to Terror from Beyond. I love the design of this card. So that's the treachery where it is peril, and as a revelation, you choose a card type, and each player has to discard each card in their hand with that card type. So the fact that this is peril is what makes this card awesome.
Yeah.
So you draw this card, and if you're abiding by the table talk rules, you probably don't have a great idea. You probably don't have any idea of what your compadres have in their hands. If you're playing without regard to the table talk rules and kind of sharing information, then it can still be an agonizing decision, because maybe you've got friend A who's really asset heavy but really wants to hold on to that event, and then friend B who's really event heavy but really wants to hold on to this skill for that and like there's no right answer. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it when the card comes up, but I love the design of it.
We were kind of chatting about that, I think, in the Arkham channel about general strategies, I guess. And early in the game, skills is probably the right one. And then late in the game, probably assets. Because usually your events are in there because events do amazing things. And late in the game, you've probably already set up whatever assets you need. And those skill cards are going to help you fight those bigger bad guys, investigate the higher shroud locations, everything like that. So
I'll actually put the assertion out there that all other things equal, given equally bad information, skill is probably what you pick, right?
I think skills is default. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
If you just don't know, skill.
Yeah.
And then Nick has to discard his 2 vicious blows. So
I think in general this scenario, it's worth mentioning, is super treachery heavy compared to enemies.
Yes.
Like there are some enemies, but it's not a very fighty scenario. So just keep that in mind. The focus definitely is more on investigation, obviously with the exception of a big elephant in the room at the end of the scenario. But other than that, and so there's also the pushed into the beyond treachery, which you have to shuffle an asset into your deck and discard the top 3.
Oh my god!
And take
top
2
3
horror.
cards. Like, what are the odds on that? Like, I know it depends on your deck size, but it feels like I hit a copy of that card way more often than I should.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where having assets that are either run out of charges or are cheap and you don't care if they lose, kind of having that buffer can be helpful, because I've definitely gotten screwed by that treachery with hitting my most important assets.
You need a fall guy asset.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever had that treachery and not discarded whatever got shuffled back in.
Right?
Like, I don't think I've ever, like, it's even been single copies, like a grotesque statue. It's like, I could only buy one because I played the thing, shuffle back in, and there it is. I'm like, there's 30-something other cards in the deck.
There's something going on.
Yeah, voodoo.
I also really love how they pulled in the whippoorwills Because I had kind of forgotten the Lovecraft, twinge on the whippoorwill, because we grew up with whippoorwills in our backyard. Like, I remember hearing their calls going to sleep. And I think they pulled it off perfectly. It's this little weak enemy, doesn't care to fight you. It's just there sucking your soul out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it follows you like, God, when it Hunter aloof, I was like, oh no. And then, -1 to your skills. It's like, God damn it.
Here I am, hi.
The one thing I thought was hilarious was when I was playing Zoe multiplayer, I did feel kind of useless at the beginning because there isn't much combat, but I thought it was hilarious when Smite the Wicked decided to hone on a whippoorwill. It's like, that's her big enemy that she wants to take vengeance on.
That's awesome.
I'm like, sure, Zoe, but her cross eats those up, so no big deal.
All right, so talking about the scenario then, first versus second. Personally, I think this one tends to be a little bit easier if you're playing it second. Because getting that strange solution to deal with the experiment, it makes a difference, I think. Because if the experiment did not ready and attack everyone every turn and just murder faces, then it'd be a different story. But I don't know that I've ever killed it without the solution. Have you guys? I've always had to
getting your
ditch it to the
solutions mixed
dormitories.
up.
Oh, sorry, not solutions. Alchemical concoction. My bad. Alchemical concoction. The story asset. Have you guys ever killed the experiment without it?
I think the
nope.
Once with
question for me
Zoe.
would be, I have not. Where I haven't killed the experiment. I've just always been like, that seems like a lot of work.
Right. Yeah, me too.
It's a lot less when you can chop 7 off its hit points.
I've only done it with Zoe because, again, this was kind of solo Zoe, which can be tough, especially in this scenario, and her chances at, like, pulling those intellect tests to rescue the students or whatever else isn't great. So I'm like, okay, I just need to go after this thing. And I got lucky with some vicious blows in hand and then her Elder Sign ability, which deals extra damage, so...
Oh my god, when you pull Elder Sign and you've already vicious blowed.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you've doubled or nothing. No.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that would be sweet.
Trigger porn. All right.
Jeez.
But okay, so it sounds like people have equally hard times killing the experiment.
Yeah, generally saving students has been my default. I don't know about you guys. I mean, if I'm playing it second, obviously.
My default, like, okay, so the first time I played it, I just kind of did what I felt like. But my default now that I know the resolutions is I do whatever it takes not to add a token to the bag.
Yes.
Yep. That's fair.
Oh, we totally forgot about the cheating mechanic.
Oh, yeah.
But I've never cheated, not a single time. Because I'm like, that's like, even my first playthrough, I was like, that seems like a really bad idea. Like,
I cheated the first time I played because I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? It'll be like something in the drinks where someone will make a random attack or something.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Elder Sign or Elder Thing.
Elder
Thing, yeah.
Eldritch Beast, something. Yeah.
But the nice thing is, it's once you cheat, like once you break that barrier, once you cheat once, then it's like, well, I might as well just cheat for every test that I can now. So it doesn't add multiple tokens at least. So.
So then talking about playing it first, where you actually have the opportunity to rescue Rice. Rice?
Yes, Rice. Yep.
Rice.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Warren Rice.
For Rice.
The investigating one. Is it worth the token? I'm trying to remember, is there a way to rescue Rice and then also rescue the students? Or does it end when you rescue Rice?
Nope.
It boots you out, yeah.
See, that's interesting, that it's kind of asymmetrical that way. Because you in House Always Wins, you can rescue Morgan without getting the token.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see what that... Because you get the Elder thing... No, you get the tablet from extracurricular activity.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see what that maybe does down the line.
Like I said, I've generally rescued the students, but in my Ashcan play, I had him rescue Rice and felt bad about it. But yeah. In terms of both story and token ad. But we'll see what happens because we don't know exactly what the kidnapping is going to entail. So
Exactly.
So,
all right.
I've got a bit of a question because I haven't
Go on.
defeated the experiment. how different is the outcome when you defeat the experiment?
Are we talking playing
Full
first
spoiler.
or second?
Is it different?
That matters.
What? See, I haven't beat the experiment.
All right,
'cause every
play
time
first.
I'm just like, that seems like a lot of work. I don't really care. So
Yeah, because if you're playing first, it's and you kill the experiment. I'm trying to remember if you resolve. I think you don't get rice. You save the students, and you get the XP from the experiment, which is nice. But I'm pretty sure you miss out on rice.
Yeah.
And then if you play it second, and you kill it, you save the students, and you couldn't have gotten rice anyway. So
same thing.
There's no opportunity cost there. So yeah, if you play it second, there's no real difference outside of just getting the XP.
It's basically a way of saving the students
hang on.
without getting the token.
Sorry, I'm looking at the scenario guide right now. There is a note that says the experiment was defeated. So that
Right.
might do something.
Oh.
Yes.
So I take back
damn
everything
it.
I said.
I feel bad for all three of my campaigns I have running right now.
Well, we'll see.
How amazing
Who's
would
to say
it
that they're not above just putting in a random note to our campaign log that actually doesn't mean anything outside of a little pat on the back, like, "Oh, you defeated the experiment, little buddy. Good job."
I would totally do that. Mess with the players, just throw in random stuff. Like Brown Jenkin will remember this, like one of the Telltale games.
He wasn't even in this.
He's always in it, Nick. He's always in it.
Brown Jenkins just knows.
On a
It
similar
should be
note-
like we get to the final and defeat the final boss of the campaign, and then the experiment jumps out and grabs you and pulls you into the shadows. The end.
I think along
Wow,
the
was that a Wes Craven's They reference?
I think that's all kinds of references in there.
Yeah, that's probably happened in more than one horror.
I think I was specifically thinking of one of the Phantasm movies, but
I think along those same lines, it'd be great if we get to the resolution of the sixth encounter in the cycle. So I guess scenario 7, because it's 1A, 1B,
Sure.
7, and it goes, if you discovered the strange solution, good for you, and just that's it.
And
Oh.
that's it.
Pat.
Yeah.
God. I only have the solution in
They're
one of
there.
my campaigns. It's the one I'm running right now with Rex and Zoe. I tend not to play a whole lot of Seeker, it turns out. Part of me doesn't want them to pay it off in this cycle. Like part of me does and part of me doesn't.
Well,
But we
that-
resolved that they're going to pay it off in another game entirely, so
Right, yeah, exactly.
pay
X-Wing.
attention in Mansions of Madness. X-Wing.
Yeah, X-Wing would be great.
I have you now, strange solution.
Or Conquest. Perfect timing.
Oh.
If you have discovered the solution, save this game.
Oh.
Well, we've got 2 more days, buddy.
All right, so wrapping up the kind of the two scenarios at least. Which one, I mean, have we kind of unanimously decided that we prefer at this point to play The House Always Wins first? That's my preference.
Yeah. I think so.
And I'll tell you why, because I feel like the time crunch in The House Always Wins to get Peter Clover is more intense than the time crunch to defeat the experiment or save the students in extracurricular activity. And I also feel like that alchemical concoction, man, that makes a big difference to putting the old experiment down. It's worth the time crunch that comes from it.
Yeah, the time crunch to me, that's what sells me on House Always Wins first.
Yeah. Especially for investigators that are less fighty. They, playing it House Always Wins second. You just get swarmed with enemies pretty quickly. So I've definitely played both, but I think House first is my preference too.
Now that may change when we find out what happens when you've made nice with the O'Banion gang.
Right.
Versus when
change
they
our
pull
view
a
entirely.
drive-by on your house later on.
I burned down my house. Joke's on them.
Oh, there you go.
Check your campaign log. If you are square with the O'Banion gang, you may skip scenario 3.
Ooh.
That's not going to happen.
That'd be
But-
horrible.
No.
Yeah, I know.
That
I
would
want to
be
play
bad.
it. I want to subject myself to torture and pain and insanity. is what we say every time we sit down to Arkham Horror.
Ooh.
So then the interlude rather, when we go back to Armitage, I've never, at this point, I've been lucky enough to never pass out. I've never had everyone be defeated and have that the investigators were unconscious for several hours, which is what triggers Armitage being kidnapped himself or not.
Mhm.
Have any of you guys?
No.
Well, Sean, I think our first 4-player game resulted in Armitage being kidnapped. If I
Really?
remember right. I think it did.
Well, you wrote it down, so you'd know better.
And I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty
maybe
sure that it resulted in that. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that resulted in you screaming at us, "That's why we don't play hard."
Okay, that lends credence to the story. There was also a lot of alcohol around that weekend, so
That's true.
details are foggy. Did we all resign in
I think
extracurricular
that
activity?
in the house, because we did EA first, and then we did House Always Wins, and I'm pretty sure I got defeated in both as Zoe.
Oh God, that's right. We all went down when
So
the
I
Servant
think-
to the
I think
Lurker
that-
came out.
Right. I think that some of us, like a couple of us, got defeated, and I think the other ones just resigned without. Well, no.
If I remember correctly,
Yeah, it
didn't
must-
everyone just take horror? Just take a
I
lot
think
of
it might have
horror.
been that. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, now it's coming back to me. Anyway, getting Armitage though, and now that we moved on to Miskatonic Museum, I've actually had one game where he's hit the board. He's pretty cool.
Yes.
Yeah. And he even
Yeah,
has the 2 random pips, right? Like you can.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes,
He's
he's
an
got the 2 wild
unexpected
pips, so he's basically an unexpected courage that you can
Mhm.
play if you feel like it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's great.
And especially for investigators who are, I guess, maybe a little bit more crunched for resources. If you're not rogue or seeker with Milan or whatever it happens to be,
hmm
it might be nice to draw your second copy of Fire Axe and be like, well, I've already got my first copy down. Hi, 3 resources, which I can then use to pump Fire Axe.
I'm swinging for 14. I know it's,
In our,
it's max 6, but yeah.
In our 3-player game, we have Rex, Jenny, and I'm playing Jim. And Rex has both Dr. Milan and Warren Rice. And Jenny has Leo DeLuca, which my wife upgraded to level 1, of course. So when we got Armitage, it's like, who wants this guy? And nobody wanted him because they didn't want to run the risk of contesting those ally slots because of the allies they already have. So I'm like, okay, I guess Jim will take it. So I'm interested to see how having Armitage in a Jim Culver deck, a very spell and mystic heavy Jim Culver deck, how that's going to play out. So that'll be interesting to see.
Because I can't remember, does he give a stat boost? Because Morgan gives fight, Rice gives intellect. Does Armitage do anything, or is it just his resource ability?
I think it's just the resource ability.
Yeah, I don't think it was that.
That's what I recall too. Okay, so since he kind of sets apart from the other two, so you've got Morgan, who gives +1 fight and lets you draw a card after you defeat an enemy, and then Rice, who gives you +1 intellect and lets you draw a card after you discover the last clue on a location. Aside from setting them apart from what it takes to obtain them, which guy do you think is the better ally?
Ugh, depends on who I'm playing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, if you're playing,
Discussion over.
That's it.
well, that might be a good place to wrap the discussion if that's it. I mean, one's an investigative ally and one's a fighty ally, whichever you tend to be doing.
And that's the thing; it's kind of hard to say which one's better because they do 2 very different things, right? In fact, even if you include Armitage in there, like one draws you a card, one makes you money, and one with the clues. What does he do? Draws you a card, right?
He draws a card.
Yeah. So
Okay, so Jigsaw traps you in an abandoned warehouse, and in one tank is Morgan, and in one tank is Rice, and you've been given a remote and a prompt, and one button will release piranhas into the tank of one of the allies. Which button do you hit?
Which one am I
Wait, so
going to
the
have
button,
eaten?
the button damns them?
Yes, the button damns them. So which one do you
Okay,
kill?
Armitage.
then if it comes down to that, I would do Rice, simply because Francis Morgan makes me think of Francis York Morgan from Deadly Premonition. It's just, yeah, I can't decide.
Far be it for me to attack your rationale.
I think for whatever reason I find myself using Morgan the most, so I think I'll leave him piranha free.
Yeah, I personally would set the piranhas on Rice because for whatever reason I find myself more often wanting extra fight than I do wanting extra intellect. I certainly have times where I want extra intellect, but more often I find it's fight.
Sure.
Playing solo, do you guys ever not take any of the people you earn because you're worried about it diluting the deck, or do you just throw everyone who wants to come along in there?
No.
I've never considered not taking them.
I suppose you have that option. No, they have decent icons, so I'm never because it dilutes your player deck, but it also dilutes the weaknesses, so I think it evens out in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're good cards.
Yeah, as long as
we're having this discussion, like, which one's the best one? Well, if 5 is average, they're all 7s-ish,
Right.
Like, it's who's the 9? So, yeah, I think they're all
and they're
good.
both draw cards, too.
Yeah.
So even if they're diluting your deck, if you put them down, they're going to help work against that dilution anyway.
And like we said, Armitage is unexpected courage in a Meatsuit, so...
Yeah.
Jeez.
Unexpected meat courage.
Oh, God. Oh, all right. Well, that seems like a good place to wrap.
Can't follow up Meatsuit.
So I think we'll probably... God, I don't know how we're going to approach the Mythos packs, because it's nice to just have a lump to talk about with the Dunwich Horror, but we don't want every other episode to be an encounter breakdown. So we'll probably do 2 at a time as they release. Maybe, I don't know. We haven't figured it out, but look forward to more of these discussions because they'll happen in some form or another. So any other closing thoughts on the Dunwich box in general, and just kind of your general impressions or hopes for the cycle?
I will say it put a completely different taste in my mouth compared to the core. Where the core, I was like, oh yeah, there's some cool ideas going on here. Seems like it's going to be a fun game. And then after playing these 2 scenarios, I was like, oh my god, the design space for this game is unlimited. Like, it just, they really stretched what I thought this game could do. And so it just made me that much more excited to play.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's wrap it there and move on into a little bit of technical time. Nick, what's been grabbing you lately?
I even changed up the order on the show notes, thinking you might go to someone else first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. What's been grabbing you lately?
All right, you know what? Fair enough. So lately we are working on that custom campaign still that I mentioned in the last episode. Chugging through the narrative development for it and getting to the point where we'll actually have some cards to design here in the near future. So a big thanks to everyone who's assisting with that. Other than that, that's really been it. I mean, nothing new to speak of outside of that, really. I know that my wife and I, we will have to move out of our current house into a new one, so we've been spending a lot of time looking at options in the area and that sort of thing, but that's not fun. We don't want to talk about that on the podcast. We're watching Westworld currently.
Nice.
I think we're like 6 episodes in now, so it's very good, very well made. But obviously you've all heard that by now, so no, it's great. I'm loving it. And then, as always, Overwatch, Hearthstone. Haven't jumped on the For Honor train yet, but I will, in the future once other financial things are taken care of. But looking forward to For Honor. That's about it.
Cool. For Honor's good. Try it.
Yeah,
I'll say about that.
I want to,
as I have already. Ian, how about you? Sorry, Nick.
Real quick, last thing that's Arkham related. I upgraded my storage. I am now one of the Artist Supply Case owners, and I will say that it is very nice. Granted, the 2 boxes plus the individual deck boxes and the random sleeves and all that, that worked. It was serviceable. But it was far from ideal. And this Artist Supply case, I did get the darker wood grain one, so that it will stand out a little bit from your case, Sean, because I'm sure that ours will be sharing the same space occasionally. But
I have the dark one too, but that's for my Lord of the Rings stuff.
Okay. Well, then I won't see it as much. But yeah, no, it's a great upgrade. So now I'm done.
All right, Ian, what's up with you?
Well, I've been neglecting video games for a long time, so I thought I'd kind of dip my toe back into that. I was asking on the Discord channel a while ago for recommendations of kind of old, like, style turn-based RPGs, because that's my preference. I kind of get annoyed that every RPG these days has to be very action-y when I like the kind of board game, classic pen and paper feel. Anyway, besides that rant, there are a lot of suggestions made, and I started playing Shadowrun Dragonfall, because I heard it's on the shorter side, which is actually a plus for me these days, compared to the 100-hour monsters that are out there. And Shadowrun's one of my favorite worlds, even though I never played the RPG, but I used to read the books way back when, and it's a cool mix of cyberpunk and fantasy, to my favorite genre. So it's a cool game. It's a fun game, fun combat, very board gamey. So if you're looking for something that's on the faster side, not too many hours, and kind of has that feel, it's a good one. I like the story so far. And the other thing is continuing to play Witcher 3. I'm usually about 2 or 3 years behind everyone on the video game front. But it's great. Yeah, now I see why everyone was raving about it, because it's really good. I liked Witcher 2 a lot, and it's kind of reminding me of why I like the Witcher series. Good story. I do like the combat in that one, even though it is very action-y. So enjoying that one for sure. And I think the only other thing is on the custom fronts, hopefully trying to get the Stranger Things out sometime soon, but I'm also simultaneously working on Lord of the Rings stuff. I think I've mentioned it here, but since I've never explicitly mentioned on the podcast, if you play Lord of the Rings LCG and you're interested in Silmarillion stuff, I have a whole first stage expansion. And
The first stage expansion.
The first stage expansion. I'm currently working through a whole cycle focused on turn bars. I'm wearing a turn bar shirt as we record this, and I'm working on the 4th scenario in a cycle of 6. So hopefully that will be out soon as well. So you can check that out at Tales from the Cards, the blog.
Nice. And Scott, how about you? I'm next on the list, and I'm going to balk that.
Oh, well. I have had
just to make Nick make that raspberry noise.
I've had a lot of friends and family visiting over the last little while, so I haven't had a whole lot of time for gaming. But one thing that I did do gaming-wise is I bought a Humble Bundle, which I didn't know what these things were. Basically, you pay a certain amount of money, a bunch goes to charity, and you get a bunch of these old games. And I bought the Star Wars one, and it has like Knights of the Old Republic.
They had a ton of games in it, didn't it?
Jedi Knight 2, let's see, Starfighter, Force Unleashed 1 and 2, Rebel Assault 1 and 2, Shadows of the Empire, which I'm really excited about.
Oh my god, N64 Shadows?
Yeah.
Oh, that's classic.
Empire at War, like there's like, I think it was like 17 games, and it was like $14. And I was like,
oh my lord.
Yes, I could not buy that fast enough. So, yeah, a lot of that.
I still to this day will remember the feeling that I felt when you get into the canyons with the jetpack in Shadows of the Empire and like are actually able to fly around. Oh my god. It was such a cool age of 3D gaming finally becoming a thing. Because before that we generally just shot blocks at other blocks with our blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And here I was going to comment about Rebel Assault 2, and that's not well, no, there were some 3D sections in it, but that one was
but they were like rotoscoped, pre-rendered 3D.
Yes. Oh,
they were true 3D.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I'm super excited about this is I've heard, like, I grew up and I only really played Nintendo stuff. Like, I didn't have a gaming PC. Like, I had a 286 till I was in, like, grade 10. So I couldn't really play a lot of these PC games. And I've heard people say, like, oh, man, I remember playing Rebel Assault or, what was the other one? Jedi Knight 1, 2, 3, whatever. I was like, oh man,
yes.
I should really go back and play those games. And now I can. So I'm super excited about that.
Yes.
But I think that Shadows of the Empire.
You just described like half of my basically half of my adolescent video gaming is described in that bundle of video games.
Shadows will be first though, because Shadows.
Because Shadows.
Good luck.
Thank
It's
you.
a lot harder than you remember.
Yeah, I have no idea how well that game aged.
Not well.
I'm gonna
Probably
guess
not.
poorly.
Most of them don't. Most of them don't.
No.
So I'm gonna leave it in my memory where it's awesome and all well put together.
Yeah.
And you could shoot mini rockets at a Wampa in Echo Base.
What's wrong with that?
'Cause-
Beautiful.
Nothing. Everything's
okay.
right with it. Everything's right.
Sean, what's grabbing you for Tentacle Time?
So I finally beat Metal Gear, which was fun. I really enjoyed that game.
What'd you think of the ending?
Know, the story. Well, you continually asking me about it made me figure it out before it actually happened.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It was
There
still
were
a cool
a lot
twist.
of hints, though.
Yeah,
there were a lot
for
of
sure.
hints for it.
It was still a cool twist. The problem is, like, I feel like Metal Gear Solid storytelling really peaked at around 3.
Oh,
And
yeah.
since then, they've been good, but, like, really convoluted, like, far, like, just very, very, very Japanese convoluted storytelling, which is fine. But I find, like, Snake Eater is still the top of the line for me as far as delivering a narrative goes, but the gameplay of Phantom Pain is so good. It's so good. I've become better at stealth games in general by playing through Phantom Pain, so there's that. But beyond that, I haven't really done a whole lot. I've kind of fallen off the Overwatch bandwagon. I played the For Honor beta last weekend, or 2 weekends ago at this point, like I mentioned. Beyond that, I'm just prepping for Andromeda. And everyone else should too, because at that point, this podcast becomes Cosmos Busters. And we will be talking about Mass Effect, and then the small segment at the end of the episode will be where we talk about Arkham.
Yeah.
Just fair warning.
First
That's why it's called
episode,
Tentacle
Renegade, best alignment or worst alignment?
Oh God, see, I can't do it for some reason. Like my like moral fiber won't let me play through Renegade the first time I play. Because the first time I play, I want to play as a good guy. I want to do like what I would do in that situation, even though I've never been in that situation. I can't guarantee that I wouldn't just go all rogue and start shooting bitches. But yeah, for the most part, the first time I play through a choice-based game like that, I play it pretty straight-laced.
I'm right there with you, Sean. I feel so bad when I do Renegade plays, except for if someone is really a dick, and then I just kick them out a window, and that feels good. But generally, I feel so bad. I usually do the Paragon or the good side first.
Yeah, and like even when I have like I'm gonna throw that out the window, it's my second playthrough. I'm gonna do a Renegade play, and I'm just gonna like there are still some Renegade options where I shy away and do the neutral one instead. I'm trying to remember I think there's one where you're just leaving a bunch of miners in an exploding something's about to happen and kill a bunch of miners, or you can chase the bad guy. And even as a renegade, I'm like, fuck yeah, because I know I get him.
Oh, I think that's in what's his name now? The Kiwi mercenary in Mass Effect 2. What's his name?
Oh, Zaid?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's his loyalty mission. Yeah, I've never committed fully to I've never committed fully to Renegade except for in my second playthrough of Mass Effect 2, because in my headcanon, Shepard was 100% Paragon in the first Mass Effect, and then she got killed and brought back in Mass Effect 2, so it's like, well, now it's just, balls of the wall Renegade.
She turns into the Terminator.
Was like, yep, and then Mass Effect 3 was like the redemption story and going Paragon again, so.
But yeah, so I'm finally playing through my first single console, one character, no console hops or recreations playthrough of all three of the first Mass Effect games, because I hopped consoles halfway through the trilogy last time. Finally playing my FemShep through to the end. I don't know what's going to happen to Conrad Werner at the end, because the first time I played Mass Effect 3, it was on an imported from Mass Effect 2, which did the little action comic, which made you make all the big choices from Mass Effect 1, but I didn't get to choose anything for Conrad, so... Anyway, Mass Effect. It's a thing. If you haven't played it yet, God, go play it. It's so good. That's a lie. Mass Effect 1 is a great story. It's kind of a wonky game at this point.
Yeah, that one's a little clunky. 2's the best, gameplay-wise.
I think 2's the best package overall.
Sure.
I think 3 plays a little bit better, personally.
Which one?
Because I love being able to modify your loadout so heavily, whereas 2 kind of stuck you into archetypes where, like, hey, you pick this class, you have these weapons. 2 kind of let you go, like, all right, you have this class, which makes you want to have these traits, so here, these weapons are probably best for you, but you can still modify.
Sure.
Now,
anyway.
I've never played any of the Mass Effect, not Mass Effect, Metal Gear Solid. But I did play one time, and, like, apparently one of the enemies makes your controller shake at one point.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about the original Metal Gear Solid.
Oh, that was cool.
Yeah, Psycho Mantis. Yeah, that's one cool thing about Kojima, and kind of, he's not doing it so much anymore, but he likes to play around with, like, the medium of video games, and, like, got the Psycho Mantis fight where he reads your memory card and tells you what other games you've been playing.
Yeah, that was so awesome. It blew my mind back then.
Right? Like, no one had done anything like that, and just kind of played on the meta of, like, hey, this is a video game, so it's going to do video gamey things that it can do.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. He did something like that with...
I was going to say, my favorite part on beating Psycho Mantis was the fact that he was reading your mind and anticipating your attacks, so you had to unplug your controller, put it in the other controller port, and he then had trouble reading your mind. It was like, oh god, that's so cool. What were you going to say, Nick?
Kojima did one of those crazy medium bending things in PT, the playable teaser for the now defunct Silent Hill 5. I don't know if you guys had the chance to play that for the short window of time it was open on the PlayStation Store.
I did not.
Anybody? No? Okay, well, with PT, it's very straightforward, very limited controls. It's just a hallway that you're walking in, and you can focus on something, which is zoom in the camera, or you can walk, and then there's some minor object manipulation. But towards the end of PT, and now spoiler for PT if anybody hasn't, well, possible spoiler, because it's a branching thing. But anyway, when you're in the menu, you can still zoom, and you can zoom in on the pause screen and, like, the brightness adjustment and all that. And one of the clues to solving one of the puzzles is only visible when you zoom in on the brightness adjuster in the menu. It is...
Oh my god.
When I saw that, yeah, it's bonkers. Oh my god,
that's awesome. Anyway, so... yeah, Mass Effect. It's going to be a thing. It's going to be awesome. I'm excited to take it in a new direction, because Shepard's story was kind of, the tone was set from the beginning, and it had to be epic, and it was universe ending, and, like, it took itself really seriously. It had funny parts, but for the most part, it was pretty straight-faced. I'll be interested to see, now that they don't have that constraint, whether the series has a little bit different of a personality with Andromeda and anything that follows. So yeah. Well, I think that should wrap it up for episode 12 then, guys. I don't know if we've figured out what we're doing next episode, but the other thing I want to remind people is that, we are a little bit behind on editing, and this applies to this other thing I'm talking about, but we've got the Miskatonic AV Club out there on YouTube where we're talking about those card reviews, and we've extracted the audio from said Miskatonic AV Club and are going to release that on another RSS so as not to dilute the Mythos Busters proper RSS, so that anyone who's interested in checking out those card reviews but doesn't have the time or energy or commitment or second screen to watch them on YouTube can still enjoy them in podcast format.
And they're totally accessible audio only too. We read through all the cards and everything, so
yes.
Yeah.
We tried to be cross genre friendly.
It is much prettier on YouTube because in the cards.
Cross medium friendly. It's not a genre.
Anyway, there you
go. Anyway, so pay attention for those two. We'll definitely make an announcement when we finally have them up and let you know where you can go find those. Spoiler alert's going to be on the Mythos Busters website too. Okay, so that wraps it up for episode 12, guys. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on Mythos Busters. Okay, so anyway, so I'll say your name and you say here or check or whatever short word you want to say so that Tom can sync this up, or whoever syncs it up. So, Ian,
Check.
Nick,
Shotgun.
Scott,
Reverse Zamboni.
Short, Ian,
Check.
Nick,
Shotgun.
Scott.
Reverse Zamboni.
All right.
Just say it quicker.
I'm sure.
yeah.
I'm sure that'll work.